Well, hello everybody and welcome back to our IAG Trade Talk. And today we're here with Joji Kokuryo from Bay City Ventures, who's joining us from Sasebo in Japan. Hi, Joji.
Hey, hi, Andrew. It's a nice day in Sasebo, but quite windy, so we can't be doing this outside, but looking forward to talking with you.
Excellent. And Joji, we're definitely getting you to do this in Japanese next time, but we were going to try and do both languages, but we're short of time today. So we've got a lot to get through. So we'll do it in English and put some Japanese dot points up on the screen. And so let's get into it. So it's pretty interesting what's going on in Japan at the moment. We've been through 2020 and the pandemic and all of that. Obviously the pandemic's ongoing, but in 2021, we're getting on with it. We've got this period from 1st of October this year to 28th of April next year for the submissions to the national government. So all the local areas are getting on with it and selecting their operators. So let's do an around the grounds of Japan. We've got 2 metro locations and 2 regional locations have officially announced their candidature. Osaka currently sitting officially only with MGM, but I hear some talk that perhaps other companies might come in. What's going on in Osaka at the moment, Joji?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. The implementation policy of Osaka changed just last month, and they've allowed for more applications until a uncertain date. Of course, you know, it's easy to say the schedule is a blank slate now, but what they need to do, the steps they need to accomplish are still exactly the same. So I think the situation right now is that what is the goal of Osaka is kind of the key point to look at. Are they looking for more new applications to come in, or are they looking for the current applicant for their public tender to kind of, you know, shake up their strategies? So when they allow for more applicants, what this really means is for the major shareholders. Minority shareholders can come in at a later time, of course, but so that should probably be the goal for Osaka, in that they're looking for either a shakeup of the current applicants.
It's pretty obvious if there's one person, one entity bidding for something, you're not going to get the world's greatest bid out of them. So obviously they want to get
for sure
it up. Yeah. But MGM has been very consistent in their desire to be in Osaka for many years now. They've been pushing through, but they have other priorities too right now. They're looking at online, obviously, and that sort of thing. Anyway, let's move on from Osaka. So Yokohama, we have an election coming up in Yokohama soon. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that and how that's affecting the bidding, and what sort of companies can we see bidding for Yokohama, which is the other major metropolitan large-scale IR.
Yeah, well, you know, as we all know, that Yokohama's bidding procedure started. I don't expect any of the major IR operators to put in early applications because, you know, they want to finalize as much as possible before they need to make the initial applications. But for Yokohama, again, as you mentioned, the political risk of the mayor election should be happening in mid-August or probably early August. And the bigger question is Mayor Hayashi going to run for re-election? She has some health issues as of late. And also, I mean, at this time, she's obviously not the most popular mayor in Japan. But the other thing is, even if she does run for re-election, will she win? And so that's really kind of the 50-50 scenario. And interestingly enough, the election, August, that's summer in Japan. Summer in Japan is June, July, August. If you look at Yokohama's schedule for their IR process, development process, they're going to select their operator in summer, but not make the agreement with them until autumn, which would be September, October, November. So again, that's kind of the risk that any applicants would face when it comes to the mayor election.
So in fact, we could have an election after they select, but before they make the agreement, which would be particularly problematic from a commercial point of view.
Yes, for sure.
And the some of the, in particular, one of the very likely candidates against Mayor Hayashi is pretty strongly anti-IR. That's the case, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we'll definitely start to see some more as well. obviously denying the citizens the opportunity to vote on whether or not they feel an IR should proceed is, I mean, it's not a good look, but it's also a good ammunition for rivals. So yeah, I think we'll see more candidates come out with the same plans and strategies.
Right, and you're referring there to the referendum that didn't happen, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on from Yokohama. So we have two regional areas as well that have put their hands up, Wakayama and Nagasaki. Wakayama's probably has got the least candidates in it. So let's go there first. Suncity and Clairvest. What are your comments on Wakayama? And only two companies got their hands up to bid there right now, Suncity and Clairvest.
For Wakayama, I always say for better or for worse, they've always been on schedule. So again, the schedule, there's no changes at this point. For the two bidders that they've had, I mean, Clairvest, we haven't seen their full strategy, their operators, their partners, so it's kind of hard to make a decision on. As for Suncity, they just released a statement, regarding their relation to the situation in Australia with the Bergen Report and Crown, which I'm sure you probably know much more about than I do. But I think one of the things is that, again, they are kind of in a situation where they don't have the flexibility to kind of, bring in more operators. But is that a step they'll take is something to kind of look into and, keep an eye on through the next 2 months or so.
As you say, Clairvest, just an investor rather than an operator. Suncity now can justifiably say they are an operator now that they have Hokkaido up and running, and obviously they have many other IRs. Well, they also have Tigre de Crystal up in Vladivostok. They have Westside coming in the Philippines. So there's no doubt Suncity is reinventing itself from a VIP gaming promoter to an operator. They see that that's their future and that they're looking to change. Clairvest still needs to announce an operator. I mean, they're not an operator, so they need to announce an operator. And the governor, I should say, of Wakayama, Nisiki-san, right? He has been governor for a very long time. I remember interviewing him many years ago, and he's been very consistent. So I think, that's one thing about Wakayama. It's quite a beautiful, it's got the marina. It's quite a very attractive place. And while they've only got two companies bidding at the moment, they have been a lot more consistent than many of the other areas. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think consistency is definitely one of the things that we see there. Their plan has really never gone off the edge in any way as it has in the metro areas. And really, they kept to schedule even last year through the pandemic. And so if that works in their favor or not, we'll see down the line, especially when they make their submission to the central government.
And just very quickly before we move on to Nagasaki, short answer if you can. The big question with Wakayama, are they too close to Osaka? Do you think it can work? Because they're only 60, 70 kilometers down the road, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's easy for me to say that it's not close enough to make that much of a difference, but again, that really depends on how the operator, and not just in Wakayama, but even in Osaka, will run their business. Because, two private companies like that are not going to, collaborate in an obvious sense until they get their own, dues back. So I don't think that, there's much of a direct effect as people speak at this point. But again, it's hard to comment without seeing the strategies of the operators.
Very good. Now on to Nagasaki, which in some ways is the most exciting race at the moment because we have 5 bidders in the race. Nagasaki right down at the south end of Japan, or west end as Japanese tend to say. Sasebo City, the House 10 Bush site. So let's run through them. We've got Casinos Austria. We've got the Oshidori, who have now partnered up with Mohegan Sun as their operator. The current Get Nice and others in that group. Current being a Japanese company, Get Nice being the former operators of the Grand Waldo before it became Broadway, and the Waldo as well, back in the early days of Macau. The ONE Kyushu group, which is being led now by TTL Resorts, along with Pixel companies in their group. And this group that's emerged very lately, the Niki Parkview group. I mean, there's a lot to go through there, but just quickly, I mean, free reign. Who do you like in Nagasaki, and what are your comments? And you're there right now.
All right. Well, I'm here right now, and I'm probably the last person that should probably say anything about what I think about the operators.
Well, we're putting you on
bidders.
the spot, Joji.
Yeah. But actually, so it's quite interesting. In the next 2 weeks, we'll see the 5 bidders go down to 3. Nagasaki is using a 2-step process in their bidding procedure, which was quite a courageous move, considering that other municipalities didn't have more than 2 bidders at this point. So yeah, again, when it comes down to 3, that's when the real competition starts. So later this month, we'll definitely see things heating up, and that's when I think we'll see the colors of the actual final 3 bidders.
I noted in their RFP that they had listed the process of 5 down to 3, but there was a thing there saying that if there were less than 3, we'll just stick with who we've got. I mean,
exactly.
They weren't guaranteed to have more than 3. So let's go. Having been through all the locations, let's talk about is there still time for other locations? So let's start from the top of the country. Hokkaido. People talk about Hokkaido, but I think it's pretty clear now that there's no way that's happening in the first round, right?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's not going to happen in the first round. The only 2 conditions it would is if the first round is delayed another year. So,
right.
For example, I mean, a lot of people, a lot of emotions, a lot of opinions and interests. So, I mean, it's not a bad thing that the city, Tomakomai City, wants to continue to lobby, and they would definitely be a favorite for any later round.
So the dynamic there is at the city level, Tomakomai City, they're very keen. Their Chamber of Commerce is very keen. The business interests are very keen, but for whatever reason, well, the stated reason being the environmental effects, the governor, the young governor up there, doesn't want to. Just isn't he keeps saying yes, we want to bid, but not moving forward and missing the deadline. So by just running out the clock, really, isn't he?
Well, I mean, again, he's in a really interesting situation. I think he's actually the most honest governor or mayor in this whole IR procedure. Of course, he's an independent. He wasn't really in any political party, but he is being supported, and he was recommended by the majority party of the national government. And the IR is a national policy. He's never going to go out on a limb and go against it. But at the same time, he's not going to go ahead unless it makes sense for them. And so, of course, environmental issues, also schedule issues, I think it plays a big part. And so, of course, yeah.
So I think
for them.
Sorry to interrupt you, Joji. I think perhaps Hokkaido, not in the first round unless there's a delay, but a very strong contender for the second round, given the noises that they've made. I think we, as much as a company like Hard Rock would love them to be there, Hard Rock's always said that they wanted to be there. Perhaps we jumped directly to that, actually. I mean, Hard Rock, they've always said Hokkaido. I think it would be reasonable to assume that if Hokkaido says no, that they might be interested in other places. Any view on that?
Yeah, I definitely think they've had interest in other areas, but considering their target of a regional market, and with both regional markets in Wakayama and Nagasaki kind of closed in their procedure at the time, I think for Hard Rock, Hokkaido is really in their hearts and minds, and also business as well. I mean, they have deep roots in the prefecture, so it does make sense for them to go for round 2 there.
Round 2, of course, we're not guaranteed that there is going to be a round 2, and round 2
exactly.
is 7 years later. 7 years later than what exactly? The trigger is not absolutely clear, so that's a long way in the future. Perhaps Wakayama would be I mean, somehow Hard Rock could get their nose into Wakayama. It would make a 3-horse race, or maybe down to Nagasaki. Let's see. Anyway, back to location. So Aichi Prefecture, the home of Nagoya, Japan's 3rd largest city. There have been noises about that, but there's a lot of political fighting in Aichi. It's kind of infamous for it, isn't it?
I think, for Aichi, the prefectural governor and the Nagoya city mayor, personally, I think it's hilarious, but they really don't get along. They've had Twitter battles, and it's kind of like an old school hip hop beef that they have. But at the same time, they actually work together behind the scenes on a lot of things for obvious reasons. But again, for Aichi, it's really a governor decision at this point. There is a budget set aside for not specifically IR, but developing the island that is the candidate site. And so it's really whether or not he's willing to move forward. There was a recall movement for the mayor of Aichi, Omura-san. But again, that fell through. So at this point, he's stable. So whether or not he'll kind of risk it with another initiative that could become unpopular, really is his choice at this point.
Right. Recall, I think, did you mean the governor or did you mean the mayor?
Sorry, yes. So the governor of Aichi.
Yeah.
So.
And the site there in Aichi is actually at the Chubu Centre Airport, which is the airport that feeds Nagoya. So quite a nice location in some ways, in that it's right at an airport, which is good for inbound tourism.
Yeah, the location, I mean, right next to the international airport. I think the one thing that does cause is the need to work together with a lot of the surrounding communities, because it does not just feed Nagoya. There's major cities in and around, major corporations in and around the area that need to cooperate with any kind of progressive bid if they do move forward.
And last location, I mean, the darling of everybody, of course, would be Tokyo, the absolute center of the world's largest urban agglomeration at 38 million people. And 38 million first world people with a GDP per capita. Well, the average for Japan is 40,000 US. So Tokyo is going to be higher than that. So 38 million quite wealthy people. We've got the Olympics coming up in August, already been put off 1 year because of the coronavirus. We've got a very smart mayor up there. Could it happen? They keep on, there's a lot of talk about it, perhaps at Odaiba or whatever, but we're not hearing anything.
Yeah, well, the location is set. Odaiba in the Aomi district. And there is, again, similar to Aichi Prefecture, kind of a development budget set aside. And I also think that Tokyo is quite confident when they think about how soon they can move the procedure. So even if they have a late start, they would be quite confident that they can finish and make their submission to the national government. But for right now, the main thing is, as you said, Governor Koike is quite astute on her image, right? She really knows what people are thinking. So the whole IR thing is for her just how it's placed in her next political moves. Like, how does she position the IR? When it becomes a positive for her, she'll come out. If not, she won't. And the Tokyo has their Metropolitan Council election on July the 4th, actually. So her own party, Tomin First, has the majority of the council. And I'm sure she will do nothing that would risk that. So at this point, again, it's really her decision how she positions the IR. But I doubt that they would make a big announcement this close to a major election for the metropolitan area.
As you say, Koike-san, a very astute politician. She, sorry, I called her mayor before, but of course it's Tokyo so big that actually she's governor. And there's even some talk that maybe one day she might go into national politics, and so she's a political animal and does all that very well. So as you say, it could be a late one and they go through very quickly. How would that affect Yokohama if that happened, if Tokyo suddenly came into the race? And Yokohama is still in the same urban agglomeration. I'm sure everybody would, suddenly the prettier girl goes in the room and all the boys run from one girl to another girl. Are we going to see that situation happen?
Well, depending on how they run the schedule, it could happen. Yokohama has a flexible schedule where the actual bids don't have to be made until late May. So again, what if Tokyo begins in early May, for example? So that would kind of be detrimental. But who knows? I mean, it's really up to how they make their own schedule in Tokyo.
Right, and let's go through. So we've been through all the locations. We've covered quite a lot of companies. But there's a few companies that either haven't announced locations or are multiple locations I'd like to touch on. So let's start with Sega Sammy, the Japanese company. Obviously, massive advantage of being Japanese, so it's a home game for them, and they already have 45% of the Paradise IR at Incheon, albeit that is actually run by Paradise, not by them. And they have history as a machine manufacturer. So how do they look, Joji?
Yeah, actually, your last point, as the machine manufacturer, their subsidiary Sega Sammy Creations has a Nevada supplier's license, which is something that can't be set aside. That's a very important thing, especially for a Japanese company. They can also work together well with local companies, which has kind of been a challenge when you get into the bigger metropolitan areas. And yeah, again, they're quite flexible in terms of who they partner with, but I'm quite sure as a company, they want to have a majority, kind of the opposite situation that they have in Incheon with Paradise. So that would probably be their view. And yeah, as always, I mean, they're in Kanto. It'll be Yokohama or Tokyo for sure.
Yeah, their power bases in Kanto. And I guess for those that don't know, Kanto is as to Tokyo what Kansai is to Osaka. And I guess, yeah, as you mentioned, 45-55, the partnership between the Korean company and the Japanese company in Korea. Well, Korea gets the edge over in Japan. They would expect the edge, and they would have also, I imagine, political connections, language advantages, doing business in Japan advantages that international companies just couldn't get. And they would definitely need to take advantage of local partners to do that, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely I think when it comes to the political connections, I think it's more understanding the political motives is kind of important, especially when it comes to Japan, because if you take things at face value, then we would not have an IR situation in Yokohama, for example. So, kind of read the tea leaves and, move forward, knowing what's going to happen is a huge advantage here. Yeah.
Whereas an international company might be concerned about something, Sega Sammy might know, oh, we don't need to be concerned about that. And vice versa, they might know something that an international company doesn't know, they don't know. Let's move on. So the two Macau companies are Melco and Galaxy. So I know Melco are very, very keen on a property in Japan. I think Lawrence Ho will never live down his whatever it takes comment, and maybe he doesn't want it. That's fine. I know he's got executives on the ground in there right now. How about Melco?
Well, I think as you guys mentioned when they had their announcement last week, and most likely strategically left out the name Yokohama in their comments for Japan. I think actually I think that represents, especially for Lawrence, his vision is not just, of course, I mean, the IR is a great part of his big plan, but Japan itself is, I think, part of his vast goals that he has. So they've already have some resort businesses here. They're doing other businesses in Japan. And again, if they go for one of the metropolitan areas in Japan, that would be the most visible example that we'll see. So they're very committed to the country. So now it's really just where exactly is he going to find his long-lasting love that kind of keeps on changing.
Yeah, well, he started at Osaka first, then it was Yokohama first, then it was silence. So it's not Yokohama first anymore. It's just we want Japan, but not necessarily Yokohama. Who knows? Maybe they end up down in Nagasaki or something. As one of the partners for one of the existing companies. Galaxy, we saw good results from them, good results given the pandemic from them in their results announcement last week. A little quiet, Galaxy, haven't been making a lot of noise, no doubt doing stuff behind the scenes. No partner announced, no local Japanese partner announced at this stage. Thoughts on Galaxy? Big team on the ground in Japan, have been there for a long time. Thoughts on them?
Well, they've been making a lot of noise locally. And when I say locally, I don't mean just in the country. I would say more specifically in certain regions. So you don't hear their name coming up in Yokohama or Tokyo, especially when you're here, but you hear their name coming up in Aichi Prefecture, for example. So again, it's when you're here, you hear the business community voices. And so I expect that would be their target at this point. It could change, of course, but their team is probably focusing on Aichi Prefecture at the moment.
I guess if Tokyo jumped into the race, they would be extremely interested in that, and you would imagine capable to do it. I mean, we always talk about the $6.25 billion burning a hole in their balance sheet, which I think might be down to more like 6.1 now, given the pandemic. But they can certainly ride out anything, and they've got the financial capability to do that, and a very capable team. We're nearly done. Genting is always the quiet achievers. Genting Singapore very ably got themselves a license in Singapore back in the day when there was one of just 2 licenses, Marina Bay Sands in Singapore, and they did that very quietly. So maybe they're using the same tactic as well. Thoughts on Genting? They're still definitely in the race, and I think interested in Yokohama, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And it's the same situation that I think, I wasn't there at the time, but that we've experienced in Singapore as well, where they're very present in the market, but just not as public. So there's not much public information to go off of. But yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, they've always been interested in Yokohama. They probably show interest if Tokyo raised their hand. And of course, they already have some market in the cruise business actually as well. So, they also have connections to regional areas, but there's nothing new popping up. So for Genting, I'm sure they're looking at Yokohama, Tokyo, and, maybe they might even be looking at Osaka if there's another way in, but it's going to be a big market for sure.
And I guess with Genting, interesting times for them. I mean, their Hong Kong cruise business is going through all sorts of trouble right now, given the pandemic. They've got a $4 billion IR in Las Vegas that they're opening up. They're a truly global gaming company, pretty much all over the world, except for Macau, except for the glaring omission of Macau. They had an interest in a hotel here in Macau, but they've sold that. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts to Genting. Quite an astute move of KT Lim to front his Japan bid through Singapore, given Japan's sort of liking for Singapore. And we see the footprints, or the fingerprints, I should say, of Singapore in the admission fee. Just to wrap us up, Singapore v Macau / China v Las Vegas, US. I mean, how are the Japanese, do you feel, seeing the geographical location or the home bases of these companies, and how important is that?
That's actually quite an important thing. It's also no secret that Sands was also going through Marina Bay Sands. So the image of Singapore, and of course, I mean, it has a great image, but it's also easy for local people to understand. They see an example. It's not what they would consider in China, which as in Macau. It's not in a Western country, which is kind of a foreign country, like in the US or Australia and Europe, for example. So Singapore, yeah, it's a really image that's easier to kind of relate to. So I think it makes sense that Genting and Sands both go through their Singapore offices.
Great. Well, that's been quite a detailed wrap of where we sit at the moment. Thanks for speaking with us today, and the IAG readers today, Joji, and we'll see you again next time, and good luck with whatever it is you're doing today in Sasebo.
Sure. Thank you. I'll do this in whatever language, Cantonese, Spanish, French, whatever. I just don't ensure quality. So.
No problem. We're definitely getting you in Japanese next time, Joji, with the English points rather than in English with the Japanese points. All right.
Sounds good.
Have a great day, Joji. Bye now.
All right. Thank you, Andrew.
And thank you to all of you guys there, and we'll see you next time on IAG Trade Talk.